I'm Chloe, 22 years old, and until last year, I lived under my parents' suffocating financial control. My birthday should have been a celebration, but instead it became the night they threw me out with nothing but 2 suitcases. "You're nothing but a burden," my father said as I stood there, shocked tears streaming down my face. What they didn't know was that their perfect daughter had learned a few tricks that would send their credit cards into a deep freeze. Before I share how my birthday disaster led to their financial downfall, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe to join me on this journey of revenge and redemption. Growing up in our sprawling suburban house, I had everything a child could want materially. My mother, Carol, ensured we projected the perfect family image with designer clothes and immaculate holiday cards. My father, Mark, a financial advisor with his own firm, provided well, but used money as invisible chains. Our home looked like a magazine spread, but felt as cold as a bank vault. From my earliest memories, nothing I did ever satisfied my mother. My A grades were failures compared to the straight A's she expected. "Why can't you just try harder?" became her constant refrain, spoken with that disappointed sigh I grew to dread. My carefully crafted art projects were messy, my choice of friends questionable, and my fashion sense embarrassing. Carol had been homecoming queen and valedictorian facts she reminded me of whenever I fell short of her impossible standards. Dad operated differently, but no less destructively. Mark rarely criticized directly. Instead, he wielded money like a weapon. "As long as I pay the bills, you'll follow my rules," he'd say whenever I questioned his decisions. When I wanted to join the school photography club, he reminded me that cameras were expensive and perhaps my grades didn't warrant such indulgences. Everything had strings attached. Their marriage appeared perfect to outsiders, but I grew up hearing hushed arguments behind closed doors. They stayed together for status and financial convenience, not love. My mother managed the social calendar while my father controlled the money, their silent power struggle playing out through me. My academic achievements became family property. When I was accepted to the state university with a partial scholarship, my father immediately claimed credit. "Your mother and I sacrificed to give you the foundation for this," he announced at the dinner, where I'd hoped to celebrate my accomplishment. The scholarship wasn't enough to cover full tuition, giving my parents the leverage they craved. They insisted on setting up joint banking accounts to help manage expenses, but really to monitor every purchase. Independence seemed impossible. The summer after my sophomore year, I attempted to move into an apartment with friends, working extra shifts at a campus coffee shop to save for the deposit. When Mark discovered my plans by monitoring my savings account, he called the landlord directly and canceled my application, claiming I was financially irresponsible. I was 20 years old. The worst control tactic was their dismissal of my chosen major. Graphic design wasn't a real career, according to Mark. "Artists starve," he'd remind me during our monthly budget reviews, where he'd dissect my spending on design software and art supplies. Carol would add that perhaps I should consider accounting like my cousin Heather, who already had a job lined up at a prestigious firm. I began keeping secrets out of necessity. My manager at the coffee shop agreed to pay part of my wages in cash, which I stored in a lockbox hidden in my dorm room. My best friend Ashley became my confidant, the only person who knew how desperate I felt for freedom. She saw the way I would flinch when my phone rang with my mother's call, and how my voice would shift into an artificial cheerfulness during those conversations. The tension escalated during my senior year. 3 months before graduation, Mark issued an ultimatum during Sunday dinner. "Switch majors to business or finance, or lose our financial support entirely. 4 years is enough time wasted on doodling," he said, cutting his steak with precise movements. "Time to grow up." Carol nodded in agreement, adding, "Your father and I only want what's best for you. This graphic design phase has gone on long enough." I sat, frozen fork suspended halfway to my mouth. "I'm halfway through my final portfolio project. I can't just switch majors now." "Then I suppose you'll need to figure out how to pay for your final semester yourself," Mark replied calmly, as if discussing the weather rather than demolishing my future. The following weeks became increasingly unbearable. Carol's criticisms reached new heights, targeting everything from my hair, so unkempt for job interviews, to my friends. "Ashley clearly has no ambition." Mark began questioning every transaction on my account. Even a $5 coffee became subject to interrogation. The house became a minefield, every conversation potentially explosive. My mental health deteriorated under the constant pressure. Ashley noticed I'd lost weight and rarely smiled anymore. "You look exhausted all the time, Chloe," she said during our study session at the library, one of the few places I felt safe. "I'm worried about you." I started small rebellions. I stayed out past their reasonable hour curfew. I turned my phone off for hours at a time. I applied for graphic design internships in secret. Each tiny act of defiance felt both terrifying and exhilarating. As my 22nd birthday approached, a strange tension filled our house. I'd always downplayed birthdays after years of disappointments, but turning 22 felt significant, the age when I'd finally graduate and hopefully break free. I mentioned casually at breakfast that Ashley wanted to take me out for dinner. My parents exchanged a look I couldn't decipher. "We should discuss your plans," Mark said, his tone setting off warning bells. But he left for work before elaborating, leaving me anxious all day. That evening, I received a text from Ashley. "Your mom called asking weird questions about your birthday plans. Something feels off. Call me." I bought myself a small chocolate cupcake and a single candle from the campus bakery, a private celebration just in case. When I arrived home, I overheard my parents arguing about the situation and final decisions. Their voices went silent when my keys jangled in the door. Despite the warning signs, I held on to a sliver of hope. Maybe they'd reconsidered their ultimatum. Maybe my upcoming birthday would offer a chance for reconciliation. I spent the evening before my birthday at the library completing assignments and avoiding the tense atmosphere at home. When I returned, my parents were watching television in silence, barely acknowledging my presence. I went to bed feeling a strange combination of dread and optimism, unaware that my life would completely change within 24 hours. I woke up on my birthday with sunlight streaming through my curtains, momentarily forgetting the tension of the previous weeks. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to hope that today might be different. Perhaps my birthday would soften my parents' stance, remind them that behind their expectations and my resistance was their daughter, a person deserving of love regardless of her major or career choices. Downstairs, my parents moved around the kitchen in their normal morning routine. My mother sipped her black coffee while checking emails on her tablet. My father buttered his toast with mathematical precision. Neither looked up when I entered. "Good morning," I ventured, my voice sounding small even to myself. My mother glanced up briefly, then returned to her tablet. My father continued reading the financial section of his newspaper. Neither acknowledged that today was any different from any other Tuesday. I poured myself coffee, the silence pressing against my ears. After several minutes, I couldn't stand it anymore. "So it's my birthday today," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "We're aware of the date, Chloe," my mother replied without looking up. I ate my breakfast quickly and left for campus, fighting back tears. Throughout the day, text messages from friends brightened my phone screen. Ashley sent a gif of dancing cupcakes. My classmate Kevin wrote, "Happy birthday, design genius." My roommate from sophomore year remembered despite us not being close anymore. But nothing from my parents. During my afternoon design class, Professor Miller noticed my distraction. "Everything all right, Chloe?" she asked after dismissing the other students. "Just a lot on my mind," I replied, gathering my supplies. She leaned against her desk. "Your portfolio project is looking exceptional. You have real talent. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Her words touched something fragile within me. "Thank you." I managed hurrying out before she could see my tears. Ashley treated me to lunch at our favorite sandwich shop, presenting me with a handmade bracelet of braided threads in my favorite colors. "For my best friend," she said, tying it around my wrist. "May this year bring you all the freedom you deserve." By late afternoon, a sense of dread had settled in my stomach. As I drove home, part of me wanted to delay the inevitable, to drive past our house and keep going until I reached somewhere new where no one had expectations of me. But I turned into our driveway, noticing both my parents' cars were already there, unusual for a weekday. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. My parents sat in the living room, their postures formal, as though preparing for a business meeting, rather than greeting their daughter on her birthday. My mother wore her difficult conversation face, her lips pressed into a thin line. My father had his financial discussion folder on the coffee table. "Sit down, Chloe," Mark said, gesturing to the chair across from them, positioning me like an employee being evaluated. I perched on the edge of the seat purse still slung over my shoulder. "Your mother and I have been reviewing the household finances." He began, without preamble, opening his folder to reveal printouts of what appeared to be my banking transactions. "Your expenses have become untenable." "My expenses?" I repeated, confusion momentarily overtaking my anxiety. I was meticulous about staying within the restrictive budget they imposed, often skipping meals to make the numbers work. Carol interjected, "It's not just the money, though, that's certainly part of it. It's your consistent, disappointing life choices." "Like what?" I asked, genuine bewilderment in my voice. "This graphic design nonsense for starters," Mark said, his tone dismissive. "We've been more than patient allowing you to indulge this artistic phase, but patience has limits." "It's not a phase," I said, feeling the familiar anger rise. "It's my career choice. I'm good at it. Professor Miller says I have real talent." "Professor Miller isn't paying your tuition," my father snapped. "Or putting food on your table," my mother added. The argument escalated quickly, covering familiar territory: my inadequate career prospects, my supposed ingratitude, my failure to meet their expectations. But something was different this time. There was a finality to their tone I hadn't heard before. When I pointed out that I'd be financially independent after graduation in just 3 months, Mark slammed his hand against the coffee table. "You're nothing but a burden," he shouted, his face flushing red. "Always have been. Your mother and I have carried you for 22 years, and what do we have to show for it? A daughter who disrespects our wishes and wastes our hard-earned money on a useless degree." The words hit like physical blows. I'd been called disappointing before, but never a burden, never with such naked contempt. Carol spoke next, her voice arctic cold. "We're done supporting you, Chloe, completely done." "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "It means you need to move out," Mark stated flatly. I stared at them, certain I'd misheard. Tonight, as in now, on my birthday. "The date is irrelevant," Carol said. "We've made our decision." Mark pulled out a printed list. "We've paid your final month of tuition. Your car insurance ends today. Your phone will remain on our family plan until the end of the month. Your health insurance coverage terminates immediately." Each item felt like another door slamming shut. My mind raced to calculate what this meant: no home, no health insurance, no way to pay for my final month of expenses. "You can't just throw me out with no warning," I protested, panic rising in my chest. "We can and we are," Carol replied. "You're an adult now, Chloe. Time to act like one." "You'll never survive on your own," Mark added with a dismissive wave. "Not with your poor financial management and lack of marketable skills. We expect you'll be back within a week, ready to transfer to a business program." They presented their ultimatum: leave tonight with dignity or conform to their demands about my education and future. The choice was clear. Despite my terror, I would not surrender my dreams, not even facing homelessness. I raced upstairs to pack my hands, shaking so badly I could barely zip my suitcase. Tears blurred my vision as I grabbed essentials, knowing I couldn't take everything. So many items were technically gifts from my parents, who now revealed those gifts had invisible strings attached. Mark called up the stairs. "You have 30 minutes, Chloe. Anything left behind becomes our property." I called Ashley, barely coherent through my tears. "They're kicking me out. Right now. Can I please stay with you just for tonight?" "Of course," she answered without hesitation. "I'm coming to get you." "No time," I sobbed. "They gave me 30 minutes. I'll drive myself." I stuffed clothes, toiletries, and my laptop into 2 suitcases. My portfolio materials and art supplies went into my backpack. Family photos remained untouched. They no longer represented truth. The chocolate cupcake I'd bought myself sat forgotten on the kitchen counter. As I dragged my luggage downstairs, my parents watched impassively, like strangers observing an eviction. "House key," Mark demanded, holding out his hand. I unhooked it from my keychain with trembling fingers. "You'll regret this stubbornness," Carol said as I struggled with my bags. "When you're ready to make sensible choices, you can come discuss terms for returning." "I won't be back," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice despite my tears. Standing on the porch with my meager possessions, I heard the deadbolt slide into place behind me with grim finality. Rain began to fall as I loaded my car, soaking my hair and mingling with the tears on my cheeks. Happy birthday to me. Ashley's apartment was tiny, barely big enough for her and her roommate Brittany, but they welcomed me without hesitation. I collapsed on their worn sofa suitcases still packed beside me, unable to process the seismic shift in my reality. "They really gave you no warning?" Brittany asked, bringing me a cup of tea I couldn't drink past the lump in my throat. "None," I whispered. One minute I had a home, the next I was homeless. Ashley sat beside me, her arm around my shoulders. "You're not homeless. You're staying here as long as you need." But we all knew their small one-bedroom apartment couldn't accommodate a third person indefinitely. Ashley and Brittany already shared the bedroom, with Ashley sleeping on a twin mattress wedged between the wall and Brittany's bed. That first night I lay awake on their lumpy couch staring at the ceiling as questions circled like vultures. How would I pay for food? Where would I live after this temporary arrangement? Could I finish my degree? What would happen to my health if I got sick without insurance? I checked my banking app at 3:00 a.m., discovering my parents had already removed their access from my account. The balance displayed was devastating $237.48. Everything else had been in the joint account they controlled, now inaccessible to me. When sunrise finally came, I hadn't slept at all. My eyes burned, my throat felt raw, and my chest ached with each breath. Ashley found me still awake when she emerged for her early class. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked, concern etching her features. I shook my head. "Call the financial aid office first thing," she advised, squeezing my hand. "They must have emergency options for situations like this." The university financial aid office opened at 9:00 a.m. I was waiting outside the door at 8:30, clutching my student ID like a lifeline. Mrs. Jenkins, a counselor I'd never met before, listened to my stammered explanation with practiced sympathy. "Unfortunately, your FAFSA still lists your parents' income," she explained. "To qualify as an independent student, you'd need to prove they've completely cut financial ties." "They have," I insisted. "They kicked me out last night." "We need documentation," she said gently. "Tax forms showing you support yourself or legal emancipation papers. Without those, you're still considered a dependent for financial aid purposes." I left with a stack of emergency loan applications, scholarship opportunities, and work-study information, but nothing that would solve my immediate housing crisis or pay for next month's tuition. My next stop was my coffee shop job, where I begged my manager for extra shifts. "I can give you 10 more hours," he offered after hearing my situation, "but that's all the budget allows." 10 hours at minimum wage wouldn't cover even half my textbooks, let alone food and housing. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed constantly with messages from my father demanding I return the family property in my possession, including my laptop, a high school graduation gift, and the suitcases themselves. My mother texted extended family members with a fabricated story about my rebellious phase and ungrateful attitude, positioning themselves as victims of a difficult daughter. By day 3 of homelessness, I was sleeping 3 hours a night, showering in the campus gym facilities, storing my luggage in Ashley's apartment, and trying to maintain my class schedule while my life imploded. Professor Miller noticed my deterioration immediately. "Whatever's happening in your personal life is affecting your work," she said after class. "Your designs show distraction. Talk to me, Chloe." I broke down in her office, the whole humiliating story pouring out between sobs. She listened without interruption, then offered practical help, a connection to the student emergency housing program, and a potential campus job in the design department. "Your talent deserves nurturing," she said firmly. "Don't let temporary obstacles derail your future." A week after being kicked out, I was still surviving, but barely. The university emergency housing had a 2-week wait list. My loan applications were pending. My job couldn't provide enough hours, and a crushing realization was setting in. I might have to withdraw from the university with just 3 months left until graduation. Then came the final blow. After a particularly exhausting double shift, I checked my small personal account to find it frozen with a notification that a dispute had been filed. My parents had somehow convinced the bank that the account was opened fraudulently, despite my name being the only one on it. I sat in the campus computer lab staring at the screen in disbelief when Kevin from my advanced design class noticed my distress. "Bank problems," he asked, setting down his laptop beside me. "My parents froze my only account." I explained, too defeated to hide my situation anymore. "They kicked me out last week and now they're making sure I can't access what little money I have left." Kevin whistled low. "That's seriously messed up." After a pause, he added, "My dad did something similar when I came out. Tried to control me financially when emotional control didn't work." "How did you handle it?" I asked. "Not always legally," he admitted with a wry smile. "But I learned a lot about financial security vulnerabilities in the process." Our conversation shifted to the surprisingly lax security measures most financial institutions employed. Kevin explained how many people reused passwords across accounts, rarely changed security questions, and left digital backdoors wide open. "Most people don't realize how vulnerable their accounts are," he explained, "especially older folks who set up online banking years ago and never updated their security." A thought began forming in my mind. My parents made me set up their online banking profiles years ago. They always struggled with technology. Kevin raised an eyebrow. "Did they ever change those passwords?" "Probably not," I admitted. "My dad uses the same password pattern for everything: birth year plus company name plus an exclamation point." "And do they use the same email for recovery options?" I nodded slowly, remembering how I'd linked both their accounts to my father's primary email. "Just saying," Kevin said carefully. "You might still have more access than you realize." That night, I received an email from my father with the subject line, "Your belongings." The message was brief and cruel. "We've begun donating your abandoned property to Goodwill. Your childish books and art supplies will serve some deserving charity cases. Perhaps this will teach you responsibility." My childhood books, my art supplies collected over years, my portfolio materials, all being discarded as casually as they discarded me. Something hardened inside me. If they could destroy my life without warning or remorse, perhaps they deserved to experience some consequences of their own. The next afternoon, Kevin and I met at an off-campus coffee shop away from university networks. He brought his laptop and I brought my mounting anger and desperation. "Before we start," he cautioned, "I need to be clear about something. I'm not helping you steal money or commit fraud. That's prison territory." "I don't want their money," I assured him. "I just want them to experience a fraction of the disruption they've caused me." Kevin nodded, apparently satisfied with my answer. "There's a difference between criminal hacking and using legitimate access you already have. Let's focus on the latter." For the next hour, he explained how credit freezes worked, the difference between fraud alerts and security freezes, and how to request verification processes that were technically legitimate but maximally inconvenient. "The beauty of a credit freeze," Kevin explained, "is that it's a security measure, not vandalism. You're protecting their accounts from fraud, just very thoroughly." I discovered through careful probing that my parents lived largely on credit despite their appearance of wealth. My father leased his luxury car rather than owning it outright. My mother's shopping habits were supported by multiple credit cards. Their lifestyle projected affluence while hiding substantial debt. "Financial controllers often have their own money issues," Kevin observed. "They're just better at hiding them." The more I learned about my parents' financial situation, the clearer their vulnerability became. Their entire social standing depended on continuous access to credit on maintaining appearances at all costs. After our strategy session, I researched legal implications at the university library. What constituted illegal access versus using credentials I legitimately possessed? Where was the line between inconveniencing someone and harassing them? I needed my plan to cause maximum disruption without crossing into criminal territory. When I mentioned my research to Ashley that evening, she expressed concern. "Chloe, I understand wanting them to suffer after what they did, but revenge keeps you connected to them. Is that what you really want?" Her question gave me pause. "I want them to experience consequences," I finally said. "They think they can just discard me without repercussions." Just be careful, she warned. Don't become the person they accused you of being. I spent the next day preparing meticulously using university computers rather than my personal laptop. I created a secure email address through a privacy-focused service. I documented the original account setup I'd helped my parents with years ago, establishing my legitimate access. I gathered evidence of their financial mistreatment, including text messages threatening to cut me off, and emails about family property. A meeting with Mr. Davies at Student Legal Services confirmed what I suspected. Your parents' eviction methods were legally questionable. Tenant rights apply even to family members, he explained. They should have given you proper written notice, typically 30 days. This information wouldn't get me back into their house, but it validated my sense of injustice and strengthened my resolve. Through cautious conversations with mutual connections, I learned my parents had been telling family friends I'd had a mental break and moved out voluntarily after making unreasonable demands. This campaign to protect their reputation by destroying mine further fueled my determination. With my plan fully formed, I waited for the perfect moment. Credit card payment due dates typically fell between the 1st and 5th of the month. My father's car payment processed automatically on the 3rd. The country club membership fees were charged on the 4th. The timing had to maximize inconvenience without causing permanent damage. On the evening of the 30th, I accessed my parents' main credit card account using the password I knew they hadn't changed Mark's birth year, plus his company name, plus an exclamation point. Exactly as he'd used for years. Their account opened immediately, confirming my access was still valid. Rather than making changes directly to their accounts, I used the legitimate security features offered by the credit card companies themselves. I reported cards as potentially compromised, not canceled. I requested security freezes on their credit reports using their own information. I changed security question answers by one character enough to cause verification issues when they tried to reset things, but not enough to appear malicious. Each action was designed to create a cascade of inconveniences rather than permanent damage. Cards would be temporarily suspended pending new card issuance. Credit inquiries would require additional verification steps. Automatic payments would fail due to card changes. I set up alerts through my anonymous email to monitor the results of my actions, then sat back to wait, experiencing a strange mixture of satisfaction and guilt. Was I becoming as manipulative as they were? I pushed the thought aside, remembering my birthday spent loading suitcases in the rain. The results of my actions materialized faster than I anticipated. The morning after implementing my plan, I received a forwarded group text from my cousin Heather. My mother had messaged several family members, having strange issues with our cards. Mark thinks it might be identity theft. If anyone needs to reach us, please call rather than text, as we're dealing with banks all day. By that afternoon, reports from mutual connections started trickling in. My mother had been entertaining her garden club friends at an upscale restaurant when her card was declined. The backup card also failed. She'd been forced to call another member to cover the bill, a social humiliation she would feel acutely. My father experienced his own embarrassment when his corporate card was declined during lunch with potential clients. According to his assistant's gossip shared with Ashley's mother, he'd been forced to ask a junior associate to pay promising reimbursement. Their confusion escalated into panic over the next several days. Through my monitoring email, I received the automated notices of their increasingly desperate attempts to reset passwords and security questions. Each attempt triggered additional security measures, requiring phone verifications they couldn't pass because the contact information had been slightly altered. Mark filed a police report about suspected identity theft, which went nowhere since no actual fraud had occurred. Cards were simply frozen pending security verification, all legitimate protection measures. The credit bureau requires additional documentation to unfreeze your accounts. Read one automated response to their inquiry. Please allow 3 to 5 business days for processing once all documentation is received. The timing couldn't have been worse for them. The 3rd of the month arrived and Mark's luxury car payment failed to process due to the card being suspended. This triggered a late fee and an automated message from the leasing company. The country club payment similarly failed on the 4th, resulting in a notice about membership privileges being temporarily suspended pending payment resolution. Through social media monitoring and updates from mutual friends, I watched their perfect facade begin to crack. My mother canceled her weekly salon appointment, claiming a schedule conflict, rather than admitting financial difficulties. My father rescheduled client meetings, citing administrative issues at his firm. Their financial disruption began affecting their social standing, the thing they valued most. Carol's friends started whispering about money troubles. Mark's business partners questioned his financial stability, wondering if his advisory firm was facing problems. Their neighbors noticed increased arguments through open windows as they blamed each other for the security negligence. All the while, they remained completely unaware of my involvement, believing themselves victims of random financial crime or system glitches. While part of me enjoyed watching their perfectly controlled world descend into chaos, another part felt increasingly hollow. Ashley noticed my obsessive checking of updates about my parents' situation. "You're spending more time tracking their problems than focusing on solving your own," she observed one evening as I refreshed my email for the 10th time. She was right. My grades were suffering from my divided attention. My job performance had declined due to exhaustion and distraction. The very revenge that had initially felt empowering was now consuming me, keeping me emotionally tethered to the people who had rejected me. The satisfaction of watching them struggle was also mingled with unexpected guilt. Despite everything, they were still my parents. When I overheard that their marriage was suffering under the financial strain, with Carol threatening to stay with her sister until Mark fixed this mess, I felt a stab of remorse. Most concerning was the realization that I recognized my own behavior, the meticulous planning, the strategic timing for maximum impact, the emotional manipulation. I was employing the very tactics my father had used throughout my childhood, just directed differently. "You look at that phone like your dad used to look at his financial statements," Ashley said quietly. "All calculated and cold." Her words hit me like ice water. Had my justified anger transformed me into what I despised? 2 weeks into my revenge plan, I received news that should have been exciting. I'd been approved for emergency student housing and a campus job that would cover basic expenses. Professor Miller had recommended me for a prestigious summer internship that could launch my career. These developments offered a path forward, a way to survive and eventually thrive, despite my parents' abandonment. Yet I found myself more focused on the latest update about my father's business troubles than on these positive developments in my own life. The realization was sobering. My revenge wasn't healing my pain, it was extending it, keeping the wound open and infected. The university housing program placed me in a small studio apartment in graduate housing available due to a mid-semester withdrawal. Though barely bigger than a dorm room, it offered something invaluable: stability. For the first time in weeks, I unpacked my suitcases completely, no longer living from temporary arrangement to temporary arrangement. My campus job in the design department provided enough hours to cover basic necessities. I designed promotional materials for university events, gaining portfolio pieces while earning enough for groceries and essentials. Professor Miller had pulled strings to create the position specifically for me, an act of kindness that contrasted sharply with my parents' cruelty. Through the emergency housing program, I met other students with similar stories of family rejection or financial crisis. David had been disowned after changing religions. Sarah was supporting herself after escaping an abusive home. Their resilience inspired me particularly because they focused on building their futures rather than punishing those who had hurt them. The University Counseling Center offered free therapy sessions for students in crisis. Initially reluctant, I finally made an appointment after Ashley's gentle insistence. Dr. Evans, a calm woman with kind eyes, listened to my story without judgment. "What you experienced was a profound betrayal," she acknowledged. "Your anger is completely valid." "Then why do I feel worse the more I get back at them?" I asked. "Because revenge keeps the relationship alive, just in a different form," she explained. "You're still allowing them to occupy your emotional energy, your time, your thoughts. True freedom comes from breaking that connection, not just reversing it. Her words resonated, but I wasn't ready to let go completely. Not yet. I continued monitoring my parents' situation while trying to rebuild my life one foot in each world. My art professor, Dr. Peterson, provided another perspective during a portfolio review. After examining my recent work, he sat back with a concerned expression. Your technical skills remain excellent, Chloe, but these recent pieces lack your usual emotional depth. They feel mechanical. I hadn't realized my inner turmoil was manifesting in my work. I've had a lot going on personally, I explained vaguely. Art requires presence, he said gently. When we're consumed by past hurts or future anxieties, our creative voice gets muffled. Whatever's pulling you backward needs to be released before you can move forward authentically. That evening, as I compulsively checked my monitoring email for updates on my parents' ongoing financial confusion, a classmate's casual comment struck deep. You check that email more often than social media, Megan observed as we worked on a group project. Must be something pretty important. I realized with startling clarity how much mental real estate my revenge scheme still occupied. While my parents' lives had been temporarily disrupted, mine remained permanently altered by both their rejection and my response to it. They would eventually sort out their financial issues, but I was at risk of defining my new independence entirely in terms of my relationship to them, even if that relationship was now based on retaliation. That night, I sat in my tiny studio apartment and truly evaluated my options. I could continue monitoring and maintaining the financial obstacles I'd created, extending their difficulties and my own emotional entanglement. Or I could choose to focus entirely on rebuilding my life, investing that same energy into my future rather than their punishment. The decision crystallized when I received an email from the prestigious design firm where Professor Miller had recommended me for a summer internship. They requested an interview and portfolio review next week. This opportunity could launch my career, but only if I arrived focused and prepared, not distracted by a vendetta. I made my choice. Using the anonymous email account, I created detailed instructions for unfreezing accounts and resetting security settings information that would allow my parents to restore their financial access without revealing my involvement. I scheduled the email to send automatically in 2 days, providing a resolution that would appear to come from the financial institutions themselves. When I told Ashley about my decision, she hugged me tightly. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "This takes more strength than continuing the revenge ever would." Letting go wasn't easy. Part of me still wanted them to suffer longer to fully understand the devastation they'd caused. But I recognized that no amount of financial inconvenience could ever make them truly comprehend the emotional damage of their rejection. Some lessons they would never learn, and accepting that was part of my own healing. With my decision made, I redirected my energy entirely toward building my new life. I applied for additional scholarships specifically for independent students, securing enough funding to cover my final semester's tuition. My portfolio for the internship interview received my complete attention, resulting in designs that Dr. Peterson described as your most authentic work yet. The summer internship offer came through, providing both professional experience and a modest stipend that would allow me to maintain my independence through the summer months. I found affordable off-campus housing with 2 other design students for the following semester, ensuring stability beyond my emergency housing period. My first truly peaceful birthday celebration came 3 weeks later when Ashley organized a surprise gathering with my new friends from housing and work. No elaborate gifts or fancy restaurant, just genuine connections and chocolate cake in our small common room. For the first time in years, I blew out candles surrounded by people who valued me for exactly who I was. That evening, I received an unexpected email from a gallery owner who had attended our department's student showcase. He expressed interest in including 2 of my pieces in an upcoming exhibition featuring emerging artists. This opportunity had come not through family connections or financial privilege, but purely through recognition of my talent. As spring turned to summer, I felt increasingly liberated from the anger that had initially fueled me. I still had difficult days and moments of grief for the family relationship I had lost, but I no longer defined myself primarily as their rejected daughter or clever avenger. I was becoming Chloe the designer, Chloe the friend, Chloe the survivor, identities built on my own foundations rather than in reaction to their treatment. 1 year after being kicked out on my birthday, my life had transformed in ways I could never have anticipated. I graduated with honors despite the financial obstacles walking across the stage, while Ashley and my new friends cheered loudly from the audience. No family members attended, but their absence no longer defined the experience. My summer internship had converted into a junior designer position at a small but respected firm, providing enough income for a modest but stable life. I shared an apartment with Ashley and Megan, our combined resources creating a warm home filled with creativity and mutual support. Financial literacy had become a priority, almost an obsession. I tracked every dollar, built an emergency fund, and established credit in my own name, determined never to be financially vulnerable again. My relationship with money became intentional rather than reactive, focused on security rather than status. Occasional updates about my parents still reached me through mutual connections, though I no longer sought this information. They had eventually recovered from the financial disruptions, blaming system glitches and identity theft protection services rather than ever suspecting my involvement. Their attempts to contact me had increased after their financial situations stabilized, messages oscillating between demands for reconciliation on their terms and guilt-inducing references to family obligation. I maintained very limited contact, responding to direct communications with brief neutral messages that established clear boundaries. When Mark demanded the return of family heirlooms he claimed were in my possession, I replied simply that I had taken only my personal belongings when leaving. When Carol suggested a fresh start, without acknowledging any wrongdoing, I declined politely but firmly. My therapy sessions continued now, focused less on immediate crisis management and more on long-term healing. Dr. Evans helped me recognize unhealthy family patterns to avoid repeating, particularly around money and control. Breaking generational patterns requires conscious effort, she explained during one session. Awareness is the first step, but new behaviors cement the change. This awareness influenced all my relationships. I became attentive to power dynamics, careful not to replicate my father's controlling tendencies or my mother's emotional manipulation. I practiced direct communication, reasonable boundaries, and authentic expression of need skills that had been actively discouraged in my family of origin. My friendship circle expanded beyond Ashley to include people who supported my growth rather than limiting it. Brittany from Emergency Housing became a close friend after we discovered shared interests in photography and hiking. Kevin, whose tech guidance had enabled my revenge, became a trusted confidant who understood family rejection firsthand. Most surprising was my developing role as a mentor to other students navigating family estrangement. When the housing program director asked if I would speak to a newly arrived student whose parents had cut her off financially, I agreed without hesitation. Sharing my experience and practical survival strategies gave purpose to my painful journey. Extended family relationships required careful recalibration. My cousin Heather reached out privately after hearing conflicting versions of my departure. Aunt Carol's story seemed off, she admitted. I wanted to hear your side. Our conversation led to a tentative reconnection, followed by similar outreach from other relatives questioning the official narrative. These relationships developed on my terms with clear boundaries and mutual respect, rather than the obligation and performance my parents had demanded. As the anniversary of my birthday eviction approached, Ashley suggested a celebration to reclaim the date. Not a pity party, she insisted, a freedom party, marking 1 year of independence. The gathering became a milestone, an opportunity to reflect on how far I'd come. Surrounded by friends who had become my chosen family, I realized the painful birthday that had felt like an ending had actually been a beginning. I thought losing my parents' support would destroy me, I told the small group assembled in our apartment. Instead, it forced me to discover strengths I never knew I had. The most profound lesson from that turbulent year was understanding that my parents' rejection reflected their limitations, not my worth. Their inability to love unconditionally, to support my dreams, to see me as a person rather than an extension of themselves was their failure, not mine. The revenge that had initially seemed so satisfying had provided only temporary relief. Real healing came not from making them suffer, but from building a life they had no power to damage. Every achievement earned through my own effort, every genuine connection formed without manipulation, every moment of joy experienced on my own terms became a brick in the foundation of my new life. I had also learned the complicated truth that anger could be both fuel and poison. Initially, it had propelled me forward when despair might have overwhelmed me. But hanging on to it would have eventually corrupted my spirit, turning me into a mirror image of what I despised. On my 23rd birthday, celebrated with my chosen family in our cozy apartment, I made a wish as I blew out my candles, not for my parents to suffer, but for my own heart to keep healing, to remain open to joy despite past wounds. That evening, I wrote in my journal, "1 year ago, I thought my life was ending. Today, I understand it was just beginning on new terms. The people who should have loved me most couldn't or wouldn't. But that didn't stop me from finding love-building community and creating a life aligned with my values rather than their expectations. The greatest revenge isn't making others suffer. It's refusing to let their cruelty define you." The most valuable lesson I learned is that true independence isn't just about paying your own bills, it's about owning your own story. Financial control is often a symptom of a deeper emotional control. The first step to breaking free is to build your own financial foundation, no matter how small. Open a bank account in your name only. Learn to budget. Build an emergency fund. These aren't just financial actions, they are declarations of self-worth. They create a buffer that gives you the freedom to make choices that are right for you, not for someone else. Have you ever experienced family rejection or financial control like I did? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support more content about overcoming family trauma and building independence. And remember, sometimes the family we choose becomes more important than the family we're born into. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you strength in whatever challenges you're facing today.